Clint Eastwood was mocked by car dealership. The next day, he's their boss. What happens next will move everyone before we continue this story. Let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this one, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The bustling streets of Carmel, California were alive with activity as Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and director, cruised down the avenue in his vintage car. Known for his rugged roles in iconic westerns, Clint exuded a quiet confidence that matched his on-screen persona. Despite his Hollywood fame, he preferred the simple pleasures of life, such as driving through town unnoticed. This particular afternoon, Clint had a purpose. His old car had been acting up, and he decided it was finally time to replace it. He steered into the lot of a local car dealership, a modest place. Clint Eastwood stepped back from the row of shiny cars, his face calm, betraying none of the thoughts running through his mind. The salesman, clearly amused with himself, had already turned away, dismissing Clint as just another older man window shopping beyond his means. Clint took one last glance at the dealership. It wasn't the cars that caught his attention, it was the way the business was being run. The lot was neat, but the customer service lacked heart. Employees lounged around, laughing amongst themselves, clearly unaware of who they'd just treated so poorly. As Clint walked to his car, he overheard another snide remark from the salesman to a coworker. "Guess we're wasting time on retirees now," the man joked, loud enough to ensure Clint heard. Still, Clint said nothing. He simply opened the door of his vintage car, started the engine, and drove off. To anyone watching, it seemed like he had let the moment go, as if the disrespect hadn't mattered. But Clint Eastwood wasn't a man to take such things lightly, not when it came to principles. That evening, as Clint sat in his home overlooking the ocean, his mind kept circling back to the encounter. It wasn't just the arrogance of the salesman that irked him, it was the lack of dignity shown to anyone who might walk through those doors. Clint valued respect, and seeing it absent stirred something in him. With a quiet resolve, Clint picked up his phone and made a call. The person on the other end answered quickly. "I need some information about a business," Clint said calmly. As the waves crashed outside his window, Clint leaned back in his chair. He didn't need to retaliate with words. His actions would speak far louder. Tomorrow, things would change. The next morning, Clint Eastwood sat at his desk, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He was known for his patience and calculated decisions, traits that had served him well throughout his life. Today, those qualities were in full play. Using the contact he'd called the night before, Clint obtained detailed information about the car dealership. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a strategic move. As he pored over the financial records, ownership details, and customer reviews, he began to form a picture of the business. The dealership was locally owned, but it had been struggling for years. Poor management decisions and a lack of focus on customer service had driven away loyal clients. What was once a respected establishment had devolved into a place where salesmen prioritized quick commissions over long-term relationships. Clint smiled to himself as he closed the folder of documents. He had what he needed. The disrespect he'd experienced wasn't just a fluke, it was part of a larger issue. And now, Clint had a plan to turn things around. Later that day, Clint made another call, this time to his lawyer. "Let's make an offer," he said, his voice calm, yet decisive. He knew the dealership was ripe for acquisition, and Clint wasn't one to hesitate when he saw an opportunity. As the paperwork began to move forward, Clint's mind drifted back to the arrogant salesman from the day before. The man had underestimated him, and soon he would realize just how big a mistake that was. For Clint, this wasn't just about a car, it was about principles and respect. By the end of the week, Clint's offer had been submitted to the dealership's owner. It wasn't a hostile takeover. Clint wasn't interested in causing chaos. He simply saw potential in a failing business and knew he could breathe new life into it. The dealership's owner, a middle-aged man named Frank, was intrigued by the offer. While he had no idea who Clint Eastwood was, he recognized the seriousness of the proposal. For Frank, it was a chance to escape the financial burden that had been weighing him down for years. Clint arranged to meet Frank at a local restaurant, keeping the meeting casual and low profile. Over a simple meal, Clint laid out his vision for the dealership. He spoke about the importance of respect, community, and treating customers with dignity. Values he believed the business could embody under new leadership. Frank was skeptical at first. "What makes you think you can turn this place around?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Clint met his gaze, his expression calm but firm. "I've spent my life working hard and proving people wrong," he replied. "I believe in doing things the right way, and that's exactly what this dealership needs." By the time the meal was over, Frank was convinced. The deal was unofficially sealed, pending only the final paperwork. Clint Eastwood, the man who had walked into the dealership as a customer, was now on track to become its new owner. The following Monday, Clint Eastwood stepped onto the dealership lot once again. This time, he wasn't there to buy a car. He was there to take ownership. The staff, unaware of the change in leadership, went about their business as usual. Clint observed from a distance, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. The same salesman who had mocked him days earlier was lounging by the showroom, chatting with a coworker. Customers wandered through the lot, largely ignored by the staff. It was clear the business needed a complete overhaul. As Clint walked through the lot, the salesman spotted him. A smirk spread across his face. "Back again?" he said, his tone just as condescending as before. "Still shopping for something out of your price range?" Clint didn't respond. Instead, he handed the man a folder containing the finalized purchase agreement. The salesman frowned, confused, as he opened the document. His expression quickly changed to one of shock. You're the new owner?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Clint nodded. "That's right," he said, his voice steady. "And starting today, things are going to be done differently around here." Clint Eastwood wasted no time establishing his vision for the dealership. On his first day as the new owner, he called a staff meeting in the showroom. The employees, including the smug salesman, gathered nervously, unsure of what to expect. Standing at the front of the room, Clint addressed them with the same calm authority that had defined his career. "This dealership has potential," he began, "but potential doesn't mean much without effort and respect." His piercing gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on the salesman who had mocked him. The man shifted uncomfortably under Clint's stare. "I believe in treating every customer with dignity," Clint continued. "No one who walks onto this lot should ever feel dismissed or disrespected. That ends today." The employees exchanged uneasy glances, realizing this wasn't just another boss. They were dealing with someone who meant business. Clint outlined his plans for improving customer service, restructuring the sales process, and creating a welcoming environment. As the meeting ended, Clint left the employees with one final thought. "If you're not willing to adapt to these changes, this isn't the place for you," he said firmly. "But if you're ready to work hard and do things the right way, I promise you'll be part of something great." The room was silent as Clint walked away, leaving the staff to reflect on his words. Change was coming, and under Clint's leadership, the dealership was about to transform in ways no one could have imagined. The next day, Clint Eastwood began his mission to rebuild the dealership from the ground up. The first step? Evaluating the team. He knew that to create a thriving business, he needed employees who shared his values of respect and hard work. Clint scheduled one-on-one meetings with every staff member, starting with the sales team. As each employee sat across from him in the office, Clint asked simple but meaningful questions. "Why do you work here? What do you think this dealership stands for? How would you improve it?" Some gave thoughtful answers, clearly eager to adapt to Clint's vision. Others, like the arrogant salesman from earlier, stumbled through vague responses, clearly unprepared for the change in leadership. By the end of the day, Clint had a clear picture of who would stay and who would go. For those who showed promise, he laid out a plan for professional development, offering training sessions on customer service and sales ethics. For those unwilling to change, he made it clear their time at the dealership was limited. One of the younger sales associates, Sarah, caught Clint's attention with her enthusiasm. "I've always wanted to make this place better," she said during her meeting. "But no one ever listened." Clint nodded. "Well, I'm listening now," he replied. "Let's work together to make it happen." By the end of the week, Clint had reshaped his team, keeping only those who believed in his vision. The dealership's transformation was just beginning, and Clint was determined to make it a place the community could trust. With a new team in place, Clint Eastwood turned his attention to the dealership's approach to customer service. He knew that the key to success wasn't just selling cars, it was building relationships. On a sunny morning, Clint gathered the team in the lot and walked them through a hands-on workshop. "Every customer is different," he began, "but they all have one thing in common. They want to feel valued," He demonstrated how to greet customers warmly, ask the right questions, and genuinely listen to their needs. "It's not about pushing the most expensive car," Clint explained. "It's about finding the car that's right for them. If we do that, the sales will follow." The employees, initially skeptical, began to see the difference Clint's approach could make. Sarah, the young associate, embraced the changes wholeheartedly. She started connecting with customers on a personal level, earning their trust and loyalty. Word began to spread through the community about the new dealership. Customers who had once avoided the place now found themselves welcomed with open arms. Clint's emphasis on respect and honesty was transforming the business, one interaction at a time. Despite the progress, not everyone was on board with Clint's changes. The arrogant salesman, still bitter about Clint's ownership, continued to undermine the new policies. He cut corners, ignored customer needs, and even mocked Clint behind his back. Clint noticed the behavior but chose not to confront it immediately. Instead, he waited for the right moment to make his point. One afternoon, as the salesman ignored a customer in favor of chatting with a coworker, Clint approached him. "Care to explain why that customer just walked away?" Clint asked, his tone calm but firm. The salesman shrugged. "Not everyone's worth the effort," he replied dismissively. Clint's eyes narrowed. "Every customer is worth the effort," he said, his voice steady. "And if you can't understand that, this isn't the place for you." The salesman smirked, clearly not taking Clint seriously. But Clint didn't need to raise his voice or argue. He simply walked away, leaving the man to think about his future. Clint's patience wasn't weakness. It was strategy. He knew that actions spoke louder than words, and soon the salesman would learn that lesson the hard way. By the end of the first month, the dealership was beginning to feel like a completely different place. The atmosphere was friendlier, the team was more motivated, and customers were noticing the change. Clint made it a point to be present every day, whether it was walking the lot, greeting customers, or working alongside his team. His hands-on approach inspired the employees, showing them that leadership wasn't about sitting in an office, it was about setting an example. The results were undeniable. Sales began to climb steadily, driven by positive word of mouth. Customers who had once written off the dealership were returning, impressed by the new level of service. Even the once reluctant employees started to come around. The arrogant salesman, though still resistant, couldn't ignore the shift in the dealership's success. He watched as Sarah and other team members thrived under Clint's leadership, earning praise and commissions that had once seemed out of reach. For Clint, it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about restoring pride to the dealership. As he stood in the showroom one evening, watching his team work with customers, he felt a sense of satisfaction. The transformation was far from complete, but the tide was turning. As the dealership's success continued to build, Clint Eastwood decided it was time to make an even bigger impact. While sales were improving, he knew that true success would come from connecting with the community. Clint called a meeting with his team to share his vision. "We're not just selling cars," Clint began, his calm yet commanding voice filling the room. "We're building trust with the people around us. If we can show the community that we're here to support them, they'll stand by us." His plan was simple yet powerful. The dealership would host a free community event, a car care workshop where people could learn basic maintenance, get free vehicle inspections, and enjoy food and entertainment. Clint saw it as an opportunity to give back while showcasing the dealership's new customer-first approach. The team, led by Sarah, embraced the idea with enthusiasm. They spent the next 2 weeks planning every detail, from setting up inspection stations to arranging for a local food truck to provide refreshments. Clint personally reached out to community leaders, inviting them to attend and spread the word. When the day of the event arrived, the dealership lot was buzzing with activity. Families gathered around demonstration stations, kids laughed as they explored the cars on display, and Clint mingled with attendees, answering questions and sharing stories. By the end of the day, the event was a massive success. Customers who had never set foot in the dealership left with a newfound respect for it. The community had been won over, and Clint knew this was just the beginning of their journey together. Despite the dealership's growing success, the arrogant salesman Jake still refused to adapt. While others embraced Clint's vision, Jake clung to his old ways, convinced that the changes were temporary. He began spreading rumors among the staff, claiming Clint was only using them for a short-term publicity stunt. Clint, aware of Jake's behavior, chose to remain silent. He believed that actions spoke louder than words, and Jake would soon face the consequences of his own choices. One afternoon, Jake's defiance came to a head. A young couple entered the dealership, excited to buy their first car together. Jake, uninterested in their modest budget, dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "Maybe try a used car lot," he muttered as they walked away, visibly upset. Clint witnessed the interaction from a distance. After the couple left, Clint approached Jake, his expression calm but stern. "That couple came here for help," Clint said, "and you just turned them away." Jake shrugged. "They weren't serious buyers," he replied. "No point wasting my time." Clint's jaw tightened. "You're right about one thing: time shouldn't be wasted, and I won't waste any more of it waiting for you to change." The next day, Jake's resignation was announced. Clint's message was clear. The dealership had no room for arrogance or disrespect. Jake's departure sent a ripple through the team, solidifying Clint's commitment to his values. With Jake gone, the dealership felt lighter. The team, now fully aligned with Clint's vision, worked harder than ever to create a positive environment. Sarah, whose enthusiasm and dedication had made her a standout employee, stepped up to take on more leadership responsibilities. Clint, recognizing her potential, began mentoring her personally. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," Clint told her during one of their conversations. "Hardworking, determined, and willing to learn. You've got what it takes to lead." Under Clint's guidance, Sarah introduced new ideas to improve the dealership. She created a customer feedback program, allowing visitors to share their experiences and suggestions. She also organized regular team meetings, fostering open communication and collaboration. The changes paid off. Customer satisfaction soared, and the dealership earned glowing reviews online. People began driving from neighboring towns just to experience the level of service Clint and his team provided. For Clint, watching Sarah thrive was one of the most rewarding aspects of his journey. He knew that leadership wasn't about being in charge. It was about empowering others to succeed. One evening, as Clint and Sarah reviewed the dealership's performance, Clint shared an idea he'd been considering for weeks. "What if we expanded?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean, open another dealership?" she asked, excitement and nervousness in her voice. Clint nodded. "We've built something special here, but there's more we can do. If we can replicate this model, we could change the way people think about car dealerships. Not just in this town, but everywhere." The idea was ambitious, but Clint believed in his team's ability to rise to the challenge. Over the next few weeks, he and Sarah worked tirelessly to finalize their plans. They scouted potential locations, developed a training program for new employees, and began building relationships with other communities. When the announcement was finally made, it created a buzz throughout the region. Clint Eastwood's dealership was expanding, and people couldn't wait to see what he had in store. For Clint, this wasn't just a business venture. It was a chance to leave a lasting legacy of respect, integrity, and excellence. Clint Eastwood's announcement of the dealership's expansion sent waves through the local community. The buzz was palpable. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore. It was about revolutionizing how dealerships operated, putting customers and community first. The team began preparing for the first new location. Clint chose a small neighboring town where trust in local businesses had waned due to corporate chains. He wanted to show people that a dealership could be both successful and ethical. Sarah took charge of training the new staff, implementing the same customer-first philosophy that had transformed the original location. Clint, always hands-on, made frequent visits to the new site to ensure everything was running smoothly. His presence inspired the new employees, who quickly realized they were part of something unique. As the grand opening approached, Clint ensured the community felt included. Flyers were distributed, local vendors were invited, and the dealership partnered with a nearby school to sponsor educational programs. The event wasn't just about selling cars. It was about forging connections. When the day of the opening arrived, the turnout exceeded expectations. Families explored the lot, enjoying the free food and live music. Clint greeted visitors personally, his genuine warmth winning over even the skeptics. By the end of the day, the new dealership had not only made its first sales but also won the hearts of the community. As the expansion gained momentum, Clint and his team encountered new challenges. Scaling up a business wasn't easy, and maintaining the personal touch that defined their success proved more difficult with every new location. One issue arose when a new hire at the second dealership reverted to high-pressure sales tactics, tarnishing the reputation Clint had worked so hard to build. A frustrated customer took to social media, sharing their negative experience, and the post quickly gained traction. When Clint learned about the incident, he acted swiftly. He called a meeting with the employee, listening carefully to their perspective before explaining the dealership's values. "This isn't just a job," Clint said firmly. "It's about treating people with respect. If you can't do that, this isn't the right place for you." To address the broader issue, Clint introduced a new training module focused on maintaining ethical practices across all locations. He also implemented a system for customers to provide direct feedback, ensuring problems were addressed quickly. The setback served as a reminder that growth came with challenges, but Clint's commitment to his principles remained unwavering. Slowly but surely, the dealership's reputation rebounded, and the lesson strengthened the team's resolve. As Clint's dealerships continued to grow, so did his influence in the communities they served. He wasn't just seen as a businessman, he was viewed as a champion of integrity and kindness. Clint began using his platform to give back in bigger ways. He launched a scholarship program for underprivileged youth, funded entirely by a portion of the dealership's profits. The program, named Drive for Success, provided educational opportunities for students who might otherwise have been left behind. At the same time, Clint organized charity drives, partnering with local organizations to support causes like homelessness, education, and healthcare. His dealerships became hubs of community activity, hosting everything from food donation events to free car maintenance clinics for single parents. One evening, as Clint attended a scholarship award ceremony, a young recipient approached him with tears in their eyes. "Because of you, I get to go to college," they said, their voice trembling with emotion. Clint smiled, his rugged features softening. "Because of you." He replied, "The world gets a little brighter." For Clint, these moments were more meaningful than any sales figures. He had built more than a business. He had built a legacy of hope. As the dealerships flourished, Clint began thinking about the future. While he had no plans of stepping away entirely, he knew he couldn't lead forever. He needed someone who shared his vision to carry the torch, and for Clint, the answer was clear. Sarah. One afternoon, Clint called Sarah into his office. She had grown from an enthusiastic salesperson into a respected leader, and Clint knew she was ready for more responsibility. "I want you to take on the role of general manager," Clint said, his tone steady but warm. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? Are you sure?" she asked, clearly overwhelmed. Clint nodded. "You've earned it," he said. "You understand what we're building here better than anyone, and I trust you to keep it going." Sarah accepted the promotion with gratitude and determination. Over the next few months, she proved Clint's faith in her was well placed. She streamlined operations, introduced innovative marketing strategies, and mentored new employees. With the same care Clint had shown her. Under Sarah's leadership, the dealerships thrived, and Clint found himself stepping back slightly, confident that his vision was in capable hands. One quiet evening, Clint sat alone in his office, reflecting on how far the dealerships had come. What had started as a simple act of reclaiming his dignity had transformed into something far greater, a movement that had changed lives. He thought back to the day he first walked onto the lot, mocked by a salesman who had no idea who he was. The memory brought a faint smile to Clint's. That moment had been a catalyst, pushing him to take a stand not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed or underestimated. Clint looked at the framed photo on his desk, a picture of the team from the first dealership, smiling proudly at the camera. Beside it was a plaque awarded to the dealership for its contributions to the community. For Clint, these symbols meant more than any award or accolade he'd received in Hollywood. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Clint had built more than a business. He had built a legacy of respect, kindness, and excellence. As Clint Eastwood's dealerships continued to grow, so did their impact. New locations opened, each one adhering to the values Clint had instilled from the beginning. Customers trusted the brand, not just for its cars, but for the integrity it represented. Clint, now in his twilight years, began spending more time with his family, content in the knowledge that the business was in good hands. Sarah, now the CEO, carried forward Clint's vision with unwavering dedication. One day, During a surprise visit to the original dealership, Clint was greeted by a crowd of employees and customers who had gathered to honor him. Sarah stepped forward, presenting him with a plaque that read, "To Clint Eastwood, a leader who changed lives." As Clint looked out at the smiling faces before him, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "It was never just about cars," he said, his voice steady, "but emotional. It was about people, and it always will be." The crowd erupted into applause, celebrating the man who had turned a moment of mockery into a legacy of kindness. Clint Eastwood's story was a reminder that no matter how small an act of respect or decency might seem, it has the power to change lives, and sometimes even the world.